The wind screamed across the canyon ridge, dry and cruel like the voices that had filled her family's home just nights before. Eleanor Hayes stood at the edge of the bluff, her boots crunching the dust of a land her people never tried to understand. Below, the painted desert stretched in crimson and gold, as ancient and untamed as the people her father called enemies. Her fingers gripped the beaded pendant at her neck, the only thing she had kept from that night. They had come west with promises in their mouths and rifles in their wagons. Settlers, they called themselves, civilizers. But Eleanor had seen what they left in their wake. Ashes, bones, silence. The Navajo called this land Dineta. Her father called it opportunity. And when he learned she had spoken to one of the warriors, his eyes had burned hotter than the hearth fire. "They're savages, El," he'd roared. "They kill, they take, and they don't belong." But she had seen differently. She had seen honor in the way the warrior had shielded a child during a skirmish, grace in the way he moved through the rocks, like he was part of the earth itself. His name was Tazhi. He hadn't spoken much, but when he looked at her, it was as though the noise of the world vanished. Now, standing alone under a bleeding sky, Eleanor felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on her. Behind her, family, expectation, fear. Before her, the unknown, danger, and a chance at something real. She hadn't planned to run. She hadn't planned to choose. But after that final argument, after the way her father struck her brother for defending her, she knew there was no home left to return to. A rustle behind her made her turn. Tazhi was there, silent as ever, his horse waiting just beyond the rocks. Their eyes met. He did not smile. He simply nodded. She took a breath that tasted like sand and sorrow, and stepped toward him. Because her family had chosen hatred, and she was choosing something else. They rode in silence as dusk settled over the desert, painting the cliffs in fading tones of amber and rust. Eleanor sat stiffly on the horse behind Tazhi, her hands gripping the worn leather of the saddle, every muscle tight with uncertainty. She had run before thinking, but now that the sun had dipped behind the horizon and shadows grew long, the weight of what she had done pressed heavy against her spine. She had left everything, her family, her name, the life carved by generations, and followed a man whose world she didn't understand. Tazhi hadn't spoken since they left the ridge. He moved like he belonged to the night itself, a shadow among shadows, knowing every turn, every whisper in the wind. She watched the way he scanned the land, always alert, always ready. There was something steady about him, something that made her fear less, though not fully. As the stars emerged one by one in the endless sky, he finally slowed and dismounted, motioning for her to do the same. They were in a narrow canyon now, where the wind couldn't reach, and a small spring glistened in the moonlight. Without a word, he began gathering stones and kindling, and within moments, a low fire crackled to life. Eleanor stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do, not knowing what was expected of her. Was she a guest? A burden? Something else? When he handed her a piece of dried meat, she took it without meeting his eyes. They sat across from one another, the silence not hostile but heavy. Finally she spoke. "Why did you come for me?" Her voice sounded small against the night. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because you were not like them." The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the sharp lines and unreadable depth in his expression. "I saw it in your eyes." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever seen her. Not really. They had seen her name, her duty, her bloodline, but not her. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the sky. For the first time, Eleanor felt like the silence between them wasn't empty. but waiting to be filled. She didn't know what was coming, only that she had crossed a line no one could uncross. And there was no going back. Morning arrived with a pale chill, the sky a soft blue canvas stretched over the canyon. Eleanor awoke to the sound of water trickling over rock and the distant call of a hawk circling high above. For a moment, she forgot where she was, until she turned her head and saw Tazhi crouched by the fire, sharpening a long, narrow blade with slow, precise strokes. Her body ached from sleeping on the hard ground, but she didn't complain. There was no room for softness here. She sat up quietly, brushing dust from her skirt, and watched him. He moved with purpose, every action deliberate, as if the land itself had taught him how to exist without waste. He handed her a piece of flatbread and nodded towards the spring. She took it wordlessly and knelt by the water, cupping it in her hands and splashing her face, chasing away the last traces of sleep. Her reflection wavered in the rippling surface, a girl she barely recognized. No longer the well-dressed settler's daughter, but someone rough around the edges, stripped of certainty. As they prepared to ride again, Tazhi finally spoke. "We are not far from my people," he said, adjusting the straps on his horse. "They will not trust you easily." His tone wasn't cruel, just honest. She nodded. "I wouldn't either." He looked at her then, really looked, and there was something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. Maybe both. They mounted and rode north, weaving through red rock formations and dry washes where wildflowers dared to bloom in the cracks. The world out here was harsh, yes, but also alive in a way Eleanor had never noticed before. Every gust of wind carried a story. Every stone had a memory. The farther they traveled, the more she realized how little she'd known about this land, or the people who had called it home long before her family laid claim to it. When the sun hung high and relentless overhead, they crested a ridge and she saw it, a cluster of dwellings built into the cliffs, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Her breath caught. This was where he was taking her. To his home. To his world. And though fear tightened in her chest, something else stirred beneath it. Something dangerously close to wonder. They descended the ridge slowly, the horses navigating the narrow, uneven path with practiced ease. Eleanor's heart thudded louder with every step. The dwellings carved into the cliffside grew clearer. Sandstone walls blended with earth, smoke curling faintly from a fire somewhere within. It wasn't just a place. It was a living story etched into the land. People emerged to meet them, eyes sharp, movements still. Men stood tall, their faces unreadable. Women with braided hair stood behind them, their children clutching their skirts. The silence that met their arrival was not empty. It was heavy with judgment. Eleanor lowered her gaze, her throat dry. She was the outsider here, the daughter of the people who had brought war, disease, broken promises. She expected anger, but what she found was something more complex. The people looked at Tazhi first, not with fear, but with trust. Whatever he said, they would listen. He dismounted and spoke in a tongue Eleanor did not understand. Murmurs followed, cautious eyes shifting to her. She stayed on her horse, unsure if stepping down would be seen as boldness or disrespect. Tazhi turned and offered his hand. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she took it and dismounted. His grip was steady, grounding. No one welcomed her, no one smiled, but they stepped aside, allowing her to follow Tazhi into the heart of their world. He led her to a stone-walled dwelling shaded by an overhanging rock. Inside, it was cool, the scent of sage lingering in the air. "You will stay here," he said. I will speak for you." She wanted to ask what that meant, what price he would pay for bringing her, what danger she might have brought to his people, but she only nodded. Later, an older woman brought food, cornbread, beans, a carved bowl of water. She said nothing, only studied Eleanor with quiet eyes before turning to leave. Alone again, Eleanor sat in the silence, the walls pressing in. Every moment made her more aware of how far she'd come and how utterly unprepared she was for what lay ahead. But when night fell, she stepped outside and looked up. The stars here felt closer, like they were watching. The people had not accepted her. The land had not embraced her. But something in the silence whispered that maybe, just maybe, it hadn't rejected her either. Days passed, marked not by clocks or calendars, but by the rhythm of the sun and the quiet routines of the people around her. Eleanor rose with the first light, helped grind corn with the older women, fetched water from the stream, and learned to move without drawing attention. No one spoke to her unless necessary, but neither did they treat her with cruelty. They watched her with cautious curiosity, as if waiting to see whether she was a weed or a seed that might take root. Tazhi was often gone. He left at dawn with the warriors and returned at dusk, his face dusted with wind and distance. When he was present, the others kept their distance, yet they deferred to him without question. She sensed his presence carried weight, though he never raised his voice or sought attention. He spoke to her rarely, but when he did, it was never small talk. "You listen more than you speak," he said one evening as they sat near the fire, outside the dwelling. "Most of your people do the opposite." She had smiled faintly, unsure whether it was praise or warning. "Maybe I'm not like most of them." He had nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. It was a strange thing, this space between them, neither friendship nor distrust. He didn't treat her like a prisoner. He didn't treat her like a guest. He simply allowed her to be, and that in itself felt like a rare gift. But the village was not without its tensions. She noticed the younger warriors watching her with narrowed eyes, whispering when she passed. One, in particular, made no effort to hide his disdain. His name was Ko, and every time their eyes met, Eleanor felt the heat of his anger like a brand. One afternoon, she found herself alone near the stream, gathering water, when footsteps crunched behind her. She turned. Ko stood there, arms crossed. "You think because he brought you, you belong?" His voice was sharp, his English accented but clear. Eleanor met his gaze, spine straight. "I didn't ask to be here." "Then why are you still here?" he snapped. She had no answer, none she could explain. Before she could speak, another voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Tazhi, silent, sudden, unshakable. Ko stepped back, scowling, then disappeared into the trees. Tazhi said nothing more. But when he looked at her, she knew. She wasn't alone, not entirely. The monsoon came suddenly, as if the sky had grown tired of restraint. Dark clouds gathered over the cliffs, and thunder rolled like a warning drum through the valley. Eleanor stood outside the dwelling, eyes lifted to the shifting sky, the wind whipping her skirt around her legs. Rain fell in great sheets moments later, washing over the land in waves, turning dust to mud and silence to song. She didn't run for cover. Instead, she let the water soak her hair, cool her skin, and wash away the ache of belonging nowhere. It was the first time she had felt clean since leaving her family. Behind her, laughter rose, children dancing barefoot in the wet dirt, women calling them in. It was the first time she had seen the village smile. That night, the people gathered in the central clearing. A fire roared despite the damp air, and steam rose from clothes drying under the heat. Food was passed, Stories were told in a language Eleanor still didn't understand, but the tones were rich and familiar, like a song she could almost hum. Tazhi sat nearby, his expression softer in the firelight. When a small girl crawled into his lap, he wrapped an arm around her without hesitation. The gesture startled Eleanor. Until now he had seemed untouchable, an extension of the land, carved and weathered. But in that moment, he looked like something else. A man with roots, with people who needed him. A woman noticed Eleanor watching and leaned over, offering a piece of roasted squash. "You eat?" she asked in broken English. Eleanor accepted it with a nod, a quiet smile forming. She ate and listened and stayed. When one of the elders began to sing, the entire village fell silent. The melody rose like smoke, low and haunting, filling the air with memory and sorrow. Though she didn't understand the words, the feeling was undeniable. It was a song of loss, a song of survival, a song for those who had been taken and never returned. Eleanor closed her eyes and let it wash over her. Somewhere, in the rhythm of drum and flame, she felt her heart shift. She wasn't one of them. Not yet, maybe not ever. But for the first time, she didn't feel like an intruder. She felt like someone who was learning how to listen. And for now, that was enough. The next morning brought a stillness that felt unnatural. The rain had passed, leaving the earth soft and quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. Eleanor sensed it even before Tazhi appeared outside her doorway, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. "Ride with me," he said, and nothing more. She followed without question. They rode fast, faster than usual, their horses kicking up red earth as they tore across the plains. Tazhi said nothing as they crested hills and crossed shallow streams, his focus fixed ahead. Eleanor didn't ask where they were going. She knew something had shifted, and answers would come in time. After an hour, they slowed near a place where the land dipped into a shallow basin. Smoke curled into the sky from what had once been a Navajo outpost. Now only charred wood and silence. Eleanor dismounted, her boots sinking into ash. Scorched earth stretched before her, scattered with blackened remains of homes and shattered pottery. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't a raid. This was a message. Tazhi moved among the wreckage with practiced calm, but she could feel the storm in his silence. He stopped near a half-burned structure and picked something up, a child's beaded necklace, now crusted with soot. He held it for a long time, then closed his fist around it. "Soldiers," he said finally, voice low. "They come farther now. Bolder." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Her people had done this. Not her father, maybe, not her directly, but settlers, soldiers, white men who looked at land and saw only ownership. She wanted to say something, anything. But what apology could undo this? Tazhi turned to her. "This is why they do not trust," she nodded. "I don't blame them." He studied her, his eyes sharp but not cruel. "You understand more than most." "Not enough," she admitted. "But I want to." For the first time, a flicker of emotion passed his face. Not forgiveness, but something close to recognition. They stood together in the ruins, two people from different worlds, bound by what had been lost. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and sorrow. And yet, in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. A fragile thread woven from pain, truth, and a choice neither could take back. They would return to the village, but neither would be the same. The return to the village was quiet. No one asked where they had gone. Perhaps they already knew. Word traveled fast, even without voices. That evening, Eleanor sat outside her dwelling, staring at the sky as it deepened into purple dusk. She felt the weight of everything she had seen at the burned outpost. the necklace, the ashes, the quiet grief in Tazhi's eyes. It haunted her in a way that felt permanent. She hadn't spoken much since, and neither had he, but the silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a pause, something waiting to be understood. She was startled from her thoughts by the soft approach of footsteps. Tazhi sat beside her without a word. For a long while, they just watched the stars emerge, one by one. Then, quietly, he began to speak, not about the raid, but about his childhood. How he used to run through the canyons barefoot, how he learned to track animals before he could write his own name, how his mother used to sing to the stars when she thought no one was listening. Eleanor listened, captivated. He had never offered her pieces of himself like this before. When he fell silent, she found herself speaking in turn. She told him about Kansas, about her father's temper, her mother's silence, about how she used to dream of disappearing, of becoming someone else, somewhere else. Tazhi didn't interrupt. He listened with the same patience she had always admired in him. When she finally stopped, he said only one thing. "You are not who you were." The words settled into her bones like truth. She nodded. "Neither are you." He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt something shift in the air between them. Not romantic, not spoken, but undeniable. A connection forged not through attraction, but through fire and survival, sorrow and stillness. Before he left, he placed something in her hand. It was the necklace from the ruins, cleaned, repaired, the beads strung on fresh sinew. "Keep it," he said. "Remember." She didn't ask why he gave it to her. She didn't need to. As he walked away, Eleanor clutched it tightly in her palm. She had come to this place running from a life she never wanted. But now she was rooted in something real, and she didn't want to run anymore. The next morning came with a chill that clung to the bones, the sky overcast and heavy with waiting. The village stirred slowly, a quiet tension in the air, like breath held too long. Eleanor could feel it in the way the warriors moved, more alert than usual, hands resting near weapons, eyes scanning the horizon. Something was coming. She found Tazhi by the corral, checking the horses. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Ko saw riders at the eastern ridge, not ours. Eleanor felt the cold deepen. "Soldiers? Maybe worse." He paused, then turned to her. "If they come, you will stay here. Hidden." "No." The word escaped her before she could stop it. His brow tightened. "You are not one of us." "I may not be," she said, stepping closer, voice steady. "But I'm not running again." Tazhi stared at her, unreadable as always, then gave a single nod. "Then you learn to fight." What followed was a blur, lessons taught in urgency. He handed her a short blade and showed her how to hold it, how to strike, how to listen to the wind and move with the ground instead of against it. She was clumsy, slow, but she listened. She had always listened. By afternoon, smoke bloomed on the horizon, too close. The riders came just before sunset, armed, shouting, rifles raised. They weren't soldiers in uniform, but mercenaries, hired by settlers or driven by greed. They stormed the ridge, expecting weakness. What they met was resistance. The warriors moved like a single heartbeat, coordinated and fierce. Arrows flew, blades clashed, shouts turned to screams. Eleanor found herself in the center of it, heart pounding, blade in hand. When one of the raiders broke through the line and lunged at her, she didn't freeze. She stepped aside, slashed upward just as Tazhi had shown her. The man fell. She stood shaking, breath ragged but alive. The battle raged around her, but she had survived. Again. When it was over, the cost was clear. Blood stained the earth, Bodies lay still, but the village stood. Its people stood, and Eleanor stood among them, not as an outsider, not as a settler's daughter, but as someone who had fought for something not born to her, but chosen. And that choice had changed everything. In the days that followed, the village mourned its dead with quiet dignity. Fires burned low, songs were sung beneath the stars, and names were spoken into the wind so the ancestors might carry them. Eleanor sat with the women, weaving cloth and silence, her hands learning the rhythm of a life once foreign and now strangely familiar. No one questioned her place anymore. No one needed to. The scars on her arms, the calluses on her palms, and the way she looked people in the eye now said, "Enough." Tazhi was different, too, quieter, more watchful, but there was something in the way he moved when he passed her. A pause, a softness. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, he approached her where she sat, just outside the dwelling. He held out a strip of leather, braided, adorned with small turquoise beads. "What is it?" she asked, taking it gently. "A path marker," he replied, "for those who walk between two worlds." She stared at it, the meaning deeper than the object. "Is that what I am?" He nodded. "You are not one of us, and you are not one of them. You are something new." She tied the leather around her wrist, the beads warm from his hand. "Will I ever truly belong?" "Belonging is not given," he said. "It is earned, and you are earning it." They stood together, watching the stars emerge. She thought of her family, wherever they were now, and wondered if they still spoke her name, if they thought her dead, or worse, dishonored. It no longer mattered. They had chosen hatred, clung to fear. She had chosen life. She had chosen truth. She had chosen Tazhi, not in romance, not in desperation, but in spirit, in courage, in a bond forged not by blood, but by fire. As the wind stirred through the canyons, Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. She was no longer lost, no longer running. The land did not reject her. The people no longer feared her. And in Tazhi's quiet strength, she found something she had never known before. Not protection, but partnership. She had arrived in this place as a stranger. She remained as something more, a bridge, a survivor, a voice between worlds. And in that space, she finally found peace.